What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Frogs Up TCU Sports Podcast, episode 12, recording here Thursday evening. I am Russ Hodges. That is Anthony North. We are back to talk about all things TCU sports. As we continue through the fall season, TCU football will be looking to bounce back with a win over Iowa State this coming weekend. The Frogs getting ready to take on the Cyclones on the road. 7 p.m. game will be played on FS2. Pretty light Big 12 schedule this weekend. We'll get into some of the other matchups, but most importantly, TCU Iowa State. We will preview that matchup, talk about what the Frogs need to do to go out and get that win. TCU Soccer also in action right now. We will hit on that toward the end of our episode and talk about all things TCU sports. Back at it again. Anthony, how's your weekend? How's your week going so far?
Yeah, it's been a really busy week. Leading up to fall break is next week here for the kids in school. So we'll be taking a little trip next week. So all the leading up to a vacation, it's always a busy week in the office and everything. So excited for vacation, excited for TCU to hopefully get back on the right track here this coming weekend. And yeah, we're going to have to figure out where FS2 is on the television dial. I know we were kind of making fun of FS2 for, I don't know, a Texas Tech game or something earlier this year, but that's what happens when you lose 2 games early. You end up needing to find out where FS2 is on your TV dial.
I think back in the day, it might have been Fox Sports Southwest. So maybe Fox Sports 2 is just Fox Sports Southwest rebranded. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But regardless, TCU's got to string some wins together here to get back onto a more relevant television stage nationally. And hopefully TCU can get back on that track with a win over the Cyclones this weekend. But before we start our preview, this episode, of course, is brought to y'all by our friends at Charlie Hustle Clothing Company. Charlie Hustle, vintage made fresh. Go online to charliehustle.com. Get your TCU Horned Frog swag, t-shirts, hoodies, long sleeves. Use the promo code FROGSOWAR. Get 15% off all TCU items. A bunch of different colleges and universities in the Big 12 featured on Charlie Hustle as well. Use the promo code 101215, TEN1215 for 15% off any non-sale items. Again, charliehustle.com, Charlie Hustle. Vintage made fresh. The On It Athlete TCU Horned Frog trading cards are supposed to launch this week. October 2nd was the scheduled date for pre-sales to end. If y'all do not know, check out our socials for more information about what On It is doing with TCU football and other colleges and universities around the country. Trading cards, $12.99 a pack, 33% of revenue going to NIL. If you want to support TCU, support the football program, support the student athletes, go to onitathlete.com or check out our socials. We have a referral link, Facebook or Twitter at Frogs O War. Of course, we are partnered with the 1012 Network. If you want to support the podcast here on Frogs Up or any of the other great podcasts that are featured under the 1012 Network umbrella, please consider donating to the Patreon, which is now live online at www.patreon.com/1012 Network. All right, TCU, Iowa State, a couple teams that are looking to bounce back from tough losses last weekend. Iowa State was blown out by Oklahoma, 50-20, the final score there. After previously picking up a good win against Oklahoma State, I believe 38-34 was the score of that one. But Iowa State looking to bounce back from a tough loss, and TCU, of course, losing at home last Saturday night to West Virginia, 24-21. TCU coming in 3-2 on the season, 1-1 in the Big 12 Conference. Anthony, what can you tell us about this Iowa State team and what they've done so far this year?
Well, they haven't been very good. Their offense has had to rely on its pass game as its run game has disappeared. And, Iowa State was one of the stories of the this offseason with the scandal, the gambling scandal, where many of their key players were found to have bet on sports, and some even bet on Iowa State athletics contests, some on Iowa State football games. So, it's one of those things that every student athlete knows you can't do. There's signs all over the place. There's seminars. You're told not to do it. And even though in the state of Iowa it's legal, it's not for student athletes. And so, um, their starting quarterback, Hunter Deckers, starting running back, Jareel Brock, uh, not going to be playing in this game, not going to be playing this season, may never play college football again. And there are several other players as well. They also turn over pretty heavy loss of players to the NFL draft. Will McDonald was a big draft pick, and their defense sorely misses him. So I think on both sides, this is not the Iowa State team that maybe TCU has run up against in the past. Teams that can run the ball with superstar running backs. There's no Breece Hall on this team. There's no David Montgomery on this team. But then also teams that can throw the ball with big, strong, talented receivers, and a quarterback like Brock Purdy is not walking through that door either. So it's I think they're struggling a little bit there to keep up with their personnel with all that this team has lost, and it's shown on the field. They've played some close games, a lot of low scoring games until kind of getting blown out by Oklahoma, which Oklahoma, it appears, will do to a lot of people this season. So, take that with a little bit of grain of salt. But they have not been very good running the ball, have not been very good stopping a lot of things defensively. They do have a talented secondary. I'd say that's probably what I would think is their strength on this team is defensive backs. TJ Tampa probably would have been a day 2 or 3 draft pick last season. He comes back and is still performing at a high level. I would say he was a preseason All Big 12 selection. He's going to be somebody that TCU will probably try to test, just like TCU tried to test Travis Hunter. And I'm not sure Chandler Morris and the Horned Frogs offense will find much more success against him than he did against Hunter. So still some talent on this team, but it's clear that the roster deficiencies have brought this team down a level, maybe not to the basement level that we might have expected them to be, just like West Virginia is not quite as basement level as certainly as we thought them to be. But having that win in hand already over Oklahoma State, it sets up for this one to be, both teams come in 1-1 in the Big 12, and the loser of this game is probably going to find its way towards the bottom of the conference come the end of the season, and the winner can keep fighting towards the middle upper tier of the conference.
Yeah, the early results for Iowa State this year were probably very concerning for Cyclone fans. You lose to Iowa, a team that is putting up historically anemic offensive numbers this year. That game was a rock fight last season. It was very much a rock fight again this year as well. But losing that game, and then you lose to Ohio on the road in some early morning action out there in the Midwest. Iowa State losing on a semi-controversial call late in the game where a field goal attempt that looked like it was good initially. The kick unit was celebrating after the kick, and then the officials come out and say it was no good. One of those
Get the
plays.
lasers. Where are the lasers?
Yep, the straight up those officials. They're up there in age. They can't. Their eyes aren't as good as they used to be. But regardless, that's a game where Iowa State just was really bad offensively. They could not get any separation from that Ohio squad, and able to bounce back though with a couple of good performances, putting 38 points up on Oklahoma State. That was a game I thought, going in as bad as it may have been on paper to watch that game, it wound up being a really entertaining game. And Rocco Becht had probably the best performance of his career in that game. He threw for well over 300 yards, I believe three or four touchdown passes. So Iowa State offensively is starting to do some nice things, and Jalen Noel is a really good player. I think he's going to be the next really good receiver to come out of that Iowa State program. You think about guys like Xavier Hutchinson, and before that, Hakeem Butler and Alan Lazard. So Jalen Noel is a playmaker. It's going to be fun to watch him go up against Josh Newton on Saturday. And I guess, Anthony, going a little bit more in depth about this Iowa State offense, you mentioned that they don't run the ball all that well, and not having Jarrell Brock is a big part of that. But Cartevious Norton is a player they had last year, kind of struggled last year, is averaging, I think, well under 4 yards per carry at the moment. Not a player that I'm really afraid of, but when this Iowa State offense is working, what are the things that we need to watch out for, and how can this TCU defense work to shut down this Iowa State offense this weekend?
Yeah, I think it's clear that the coaching staff would love for Cartevious Norton to be a dude. Um, they continue to feed him the rock. Yeah, he's averaging 3.2 yards per carry this season, which is quite bad. And I think he is there. He's their bell cow. He's the lead back, and they continue to force feed him, and it just hasn't really worked. Um, I think some of that might be offensive line play is poor. But Rocco Becht has been fairly solid. I think he's, an average to above average quarterback in the Big 12. I think he has the ability and some okay weapons out there that's probably the best chance that this offense has to attack TCU. I think that in the end, one of the stats that I thought was very interesting in the comparison for this game, Iowa State is allowing the fewest sacks in the Big 12, while TCU, despite getting 0 last week, is earning the most sacks defensively, which I think I think TCU is going to struggle defensively against the Iowa State offensive front. Um, but what that does is give Beck that time to find Noel. I think Jalen Noel, the receiver, has complete ability to play slot and to play outside, and will find wherever the matchup leads him. I don't know that TC will be able to just match up Josh Newton on him and shut him down that way. I think it's going to have to be a full team effort from the TCU secondary to shut down the receiving core. And it's not just Noel. I mean, they've got a handful of guys that can all get it done. I mean, Jaden Higgins also has 16 receptions, 244 yards on the season. That's a 15-yard a catch average, 3 touchdowns. He's leading the team in touchdowns. So a lot of the attack, surprisingly, will be through the air, and TCU will just have to stand up to that heat.
I feel like that almost works to TCU's benefit defensively, that the secondary, which has played really well over the last few weeks, has allowed the defense to get quite a few coverage sacks. Not any against West Virginia, but against SMU, they were able to get a few sacks there in the second half because Preston Stone would drop back for 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, and just not have anywhere to go with the football. And then the Frogs were ultimately able to get home. And that's credit to the secondary for doing a great job on the back end. This group seems to be playing with more and more confidence. Mark Perry's been doing a great job since week 1. Bud Clark nearly had his 3rd interception in 3 games last week, just was an inch or so away from making that turnover happen. And Josh Newton is still playing at a really high level. So I think Iowa State struggles to run the ball will play into TCU's hand, having to throw the ball against a secondary that's been playing really well recently. But at the same time, SMU wasn't a team that was really known for running the ball this year either, and they had over 100 yards rushing in the first half of that game because that offensive line was getting a lot of push. And that's kind of a theme that has emerged over these last couple of games, specifically in the loss to West Virginia. TCU is really getting beat up in the trenches right now. And I guess as we transition this discussion to looking at the Iowa State defense, they're a defense that's had some big time playmakers come out of there on the defensive line. The last couple of years, you mentioned Will McDonald. This TCU offensive line has to start getting some more push. And I don't know if they need to rotate some guys around. The good news for the Frog fans, is that Brandon Coleman is expected to play in this game. He did not play last week against West Virginia, the starting left guard. Suffered an injury and didn't play last week, and I think TCU was sorely missing him. He's a captain on the team. He's a great player. So TCU getting him back for this matchup is going to be huge, but TCU's got to be better in the trenches. And so I guess, Anthony, when you look at this Iowa State defense, which really struggled against Oklahoma, struggled against Oklahoma State as well, despite the fact that the Cowboys are kind of rotating a carousel of quarterbacks at the moment. How can TCU exploit this Iowa State defense, and what does the offense need to do to get back on track here?
Yeah, it looks like TCU needs to get this done on big plays, explosive plays, scoring from long distance, because TCU's offense is one of the worst in the country at scoring in the red zone. And we've harped on that, and we don't have to go into any of that. But they are bottom 20, number 122 in the country at scoring in the red zone, only scoring touchdowns 50% of occasions, opportunities, once reaching inside the 20-yard line. So that's one of TCU's negatives. Iowa State is quite good at that defensively, preventing teams once that field shrinks, once you're there and you have to go get those few yards. Iowa State has been a little bit of a bend but don't break in that position, only allowing a handful of scores in that red zone outside of the Oklahoma game. They did allow 3 touchdowns to Oklahoma in the red zone, but you exclude that contest and they become one of the best in the country at keeping teams out of the end zone when inside the 20. So that's kind of a bad on good, a strength on weakness opportunity there for the Iowa State defense. And what that means, TCU needs to hit those explosive plays. Dalen Wright is back and looks to be ready to kind of continue his breakout. He had a very nice game against West Virginia, had a nice touchdown, and getting him back in kind of the groove with Chandler Morris, I think that there should be opportunities for him to hit some big plays, maybe get some deep to Warren Thompson, or please get Savion Williams involved in this offense. But when TCU does get down in that red zone, I think it needs to be Jared Wiley down there. Completely went away from him in the West Virginia game, and I think there should be opportunity for him to find success against this Iowa State defense. Like I said, TJ Tampa, some of the other safeties there are really strong, but nobody with the size to keep up with Wiley, nobody with, and certainly Wiley has the route running to get past any of the linebackers here. So, I think that's where TCU needs to go attack. I'd love to see a big Amani Bailey game. But I think that Iowa State will be able to focus attention to stopping that run game and allow those really talented defensive backs to kind of live on an island and say, all right, Chandler Morris, come and beat us. And it'll be up to the offense to make sure to take advantage of that. And whether that's scheme or whether it's just get the ball to the playmakers and let them do something, we'll see on Saturday.
And getting into the keys to victory for TCU, and if y'all haven't checked out our website, frogsaward.com, Miles Perry, one of our great contributors, put up a keys to victory story for TCU in this matchup. And I think it really starts with running the football. I think a little bit of a bad habit that TCU is falling into right now offensively is trying to throw the ball on early downs and not picking up good yardage, or settling for incomplete passes that put you in 2nd and 10 or 3rd down and 9. And that's something that Sonny Dykes alluded to in the post-game press conference after the loss to West Virginia, is that TCU's not winning on first and second downs. And you win on first and second down by running the football effectively. And it's not that Amani Bailey is struggling or not hitting the holes. It starts with the offensive line. I think this group, I'm going to be watching. Typically in these games, I don't watch the offensive line all too closely because I'm watching, like most of us, we're watching the quarterbacks, we're watching the running backs, we're watching the receivers, wherever the ball's going. But I'm going to make a mental note to watch the offensive line real closely in this game because I want to see whether or not this unit can respond after really losing in the trenches last week and losing in the trenches for most of the game against SMU. And if they can't, I'd like to see who's not pulling their weight up front. And I think back to last season, I feel like at times we kind of took TCU's offensive line for granted last year, just the continuity and the talent that TCU had with Steve Avila and Alana Lee, who comes in and plays at a first team all conference level. You have Wes Harris, who's a 6-year starter. Those guys are all gone, and you have Andrew Coker changing positions, going from right tackle to left tackle. Brandon Coleman's kicking back inside from left tackle to left guard. And we need to see this unit really dominate this football game. That's what I would love to see, because if you can get that push up front and you can run the ball effectively, then the playbook opens up for TCU and they can get into the RPO passing game, which is really what they're trying to do with Chandler Morris. They're trying to get the ball out quickly. They're trying to play with tempo, get JP Richardson going in the slot on a slant, quick passes, get the ball out. And if you can't run the ball, that takes a lot of that RPO stuff away. And we know that Chandler Morris can tuck and run and make plays with his feet, but we've seen, in the play earlier this year, I believe it was in the SMU game where TCU gets down in the red zone. They fake the handoff to Bailey. They fake the screen pass out to the flat, and then Jared Wiley, who looks like he's coming out ready to block, goes right over the middle and catches a wide open touchdown. Like that's set up by being able to protect, being able to run the ball, and that was just a really good play. And so I want to see TCU's offensive line. The key to victory for me is this offensive line needs to step up and get some real push, and TCU can get back to doing what I think it does best, and that's running the football and being able to execute RPO and some play action off of that. So that's what I'm going to be watching for. Anthony, for you, what's your key to victory for TCU in this game? How do the Frogs go to Ames and come out with a win on Saturday?
Yeah, you hit on it a little bit. I think it's you've got to pick up first downs. The 3 and outs or 4 and outs are really a killer for this team when you're going to be playing with that kind of tempo. That if this defense is just forced to play with bad field position, put in bad positions all day, eventually it will break to where the opponent scores enough points that they take advantage of you, like West Virginia last week. So, I think that this offense not being forced immediately off the field on drives is going to be huge. And yeah, that certainly starts with success on first down and whatever that offensive line can do to improve from a week ago. You're getting some personnel back. That'll help. But I think also there'll probably need to be some scheme changes just to settle Chandler Morris in a little bit. Give him some easy throws, give him some easy runs, scheme something up for him to let him use his wheels intentionally with purpose. Let him get out there on the run a little bit here, because I think he will have that space as Iowa State will be crashing to stop Amani Bailey. Those defensive backs are going to have to be sprinting with the wide receivers out on the outside. Let Chandler Morris get some space and run. I think getting him comfortable in the game, and it's another thing Sonny Dykes talked about last week of, he was a little, I don't know, shaken, or, he was under pressure. He felt the heat, and that set him back a little bit, Chandler Morris last week. So I think that if he's given opportunity to have a little bit of time, but if he's not going to have time, get him some easy passes into a rhythm. Let him do his thing, because when he's able to do that, he does it at a very high level, and the Frogs have a lot of success. So that's how I see TCU coming away with the victory here. And one thing before, if we're moving on to like predictions and stuff, I do want to say one other. It's a mental thing in this game that's not something on the field, or it's an intangible thing, but this game will be the Jack Trice legacy game. They're honoring Jack Trice, who of course is the namesake on the stadium there. They'll be in their kind of cool old jerseys from like the 1920s. It's going to be an emotional, excited. The Iowa State team is going to be very excited. The fans there, night game. It's going to be a difficult atmosphere. And, it's the kind of thing like Boston College has their red bandana game. A lot of these schools have this game where it's like, look, we're putting it all into this. We're putting all of our emotion. We're putting all of our chips into this game. And the team plays up to that. And so I think that can be a factor in this one that could, if TCU doesn't watch out, can certainly have the Horned Frogs getting kind of caught up under that wave. That riding that wave of emotion and that momentum, if the Cyclones get rolling, it could roll right over the Frogs in this one.
And Iowa State always seems to play with a little bit of extra magic when they're taking on TCU and Ames. I think back to 2017 when TCU came in as a top 10, I believe top 5 even team in the country, and they knock off the Frogs and Kenny Hill, and that defense really dominated that game. So I expect Iowa State's going to come out and play with a lot of energy, have some magic, and TCU's got to have a little bit of magic of its own. And I'm going to look to special teams. I think TCU special teams last year was another thing that I don't think we really talk about enough. The plays that Darius Davis was able to make in returns, and Griffin Kell, the season that he had. We've talked about his struggles on field goals this year, and the coaching staff may be putting him in some positions to attempt really difficult kicks, and that field goal percentage might weigh on a kicker a little bit as the season goes on. And I want to see TCU make some big special teams plays. We've seen it earlier this season. There was the blocked, I think it was a blocked field goal against Colorado earlier this year. We've had a blocked punt this year against Nicholls State. So we got to see a little bit of special teams magic this weekend. And Sonny Dykes alluded to a quote unquote open competition going on right now for punt returns, because JoJo Earl has really struggled in that role with receiving those punts. So we'll see if somebody can get slotted into that role and get it figured out, because if TCU can have that dynamic in the third phase where they're really able to flip field position in an offensive or a defensive manner, it's going to be huge, because TCU really struggled to flip field position against West Virginia, specifically in the third quarter. That game, TCU was starting drives deep in its own territory, in its own red zone, and then West Virginia was getting the ball right around midfield or even in TCU territory. So we'll see if TCU can make some special teams magic happen this weekend. And as we get into our predictions here, I'm going with TCU, of course. My final score is TCU 31, Iowa State 14. I think this defense is going to lock down the Iowa State passing game. I expect some big plays to be made in the secondary, a group that, again, is just playing really well right now, tackling well, covering well. And I think it's going to be really difficult for Rocco Becht to make a lot happen with his arm in this game. And then offensively, I think the Frogs are going to come out and run the ball better than they have the last couple of weeks. And I expect TCU to come away with a win here, 31-14.
Yeah, I certainly see a world where TCU comes out and wins this game big, just like Oklahoma did last week. I think there is a world where TCU kind of blows the doors off here, scores a lot of points, shuts down the Cyclone offense and just runs away with a win. For me, though, I'm going to have to see it to believe it. I'm too scarred from TCU's offensive performance from a week ago. I thought it was extremely poor, and that's a home game against West Virginia. And this is going to be, like I said, a difficult atmosphere, and there's every reason to think that Iowa State can trip up TCU here. Honestly, going into the week, I thought I was going to come here and have Iowa State as a winner just because I was feeling pretty low. But the more and more I thought about it, I just not even as purple glasses guy, just as I can't logically see it happening. I can't, in common sense, allow myself to pick Iowa State to win this game. I think TCU is a much better team, much more talented team. Probably a better coached team. I know a lot of people think pretty highly of Matt Campbell and the staff there. I don't know. I think TCU should come away with the win here, but I do think it's going to be a low scoring kind of battle. I just think that's the way Iowa State kind of pulls you into the mud that way, particularly in Ames. And so I've got it as TCU coming away with a 24-13 victory. So that assumes Griffin Kell makes a field goal, so that's good. That assumes that TCU scores a few touchdowns and that Iowa State maybe scores one touchdown, and that's all. So that's where I'm seeing it. It's still a big victory, still covers the spread, but it's more of a mud fight than a track race.
And Vegas, I think, also sees this as a mud fight as well, because I believe the spread was only 6.5. I think last I checked, it was 6.5.
6.5.
It's right around, 6.5. So it's going to be a really good game, and this is a critical game, I think, for TCU season 3-2. You're in the front half of the Big 12 schedule where these are your quote unquote easy games. I mean, you beat Houston, you lose to West Virginia, but after this, you've got BYU, you've got Kansas State, a bye week, and then you still have to play Texas and Oklahoma and Texas Tech in Lubbock. So if TCU loses this game and falls to 3-3, things could get ugly very quickly.
Yeah, the bowl game projections become kind of 50-50. It comes down to, can you actually beat BYU? Can you actually beat Baylor? Can you actually go to Lubbock and get a win? Because you're probably, if you lose this one, you're probably not going to Manhattan and getting a win. You're not going to Lubbock or to Norman and getting a win. And you're certainly not beating Texas. So, I think for what this season ends up being, you have to go win this game. This is a must win for TCU as much as it can be in, the first week of October.
Yeah, I think a loss in this game could change your bowl projection from the Alamo Bowl to the Pop-Tarts Bowl very quickly. So we will see if TCU can go on the road again Saturday evening, 7 p.m. FS2, TCU Iowa State. Tune in. TCU going with the tricolor uniforms this weekend. Hopefully that'll bring the Frogs some luck and a little bit of magic of their own as they look to go on the road and take down the Cyclones. That will do it with our TCU football talk on the podcast this evening. We will do a quick preview here of the Big 12 matchups for week 6. We have a pretty light schedule this week, 4 teams that are on byes, but we have, of course, the Red River rivalry between Oklahoma and Texas. Both of those teams ranked in the top 12 in the country. That's going to be Big 12 championship stakes in that matchup. That's going to be a really fun one. That'll be at 11 a.m. on ABC. Tomorrow night, we have Kansas State at Oklahoma State. Something tells me that this might be a little bit of a trap game for the Wildcats. Oklahoma State, we've talked about their struggles on the podcast a few times now. And if there was any way to get that program back on track, it would be with a home win against Kansas State. So we'll see what happens there. That's going to be tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. on ESPN. Midday game, Saturday, UCF at Kansas. Jalen Daniels not playing for the Jayhawks again, still nursing a back injury. Jason Bean is going to get the start for Kansas after they got destroyed by Texas last weekend. And then the night game will be Texas Tech at Baylor, going on at the same time as TCU Iowa State. That'll be on ESPN2, 7 p.m. kickoff. Baylor looking to build on a miraculous comeback, really, against UCF last weekend, where they were down 35-7, I believe, and then scored 26 fourth quarter points to win that game by 1. So, Anthony, what are your thoughts on this slate of games? I'm sure you have some thoughts about the Red River rivalry, but what are your thoughts on just the matchups here this weekend?
I think this is a very good opportunity for UCF to get its first Big 12 conference win, to get a win over, to be the first to get of the new members to get a win over one of the legacy members in Lawrence. No Jalen Daniels. Now, I mean, UCF is probably reeling a little bit after falling apart against Baylor. Obviously, should have had that one locked up and couldn't get the job done. But I think there's as good a chance as any that they go in there and go get a win. I think that'll be a really fun game, pretty interesting. Yeah, I guess I can see what you're saying about the trap game on the road for Kansas State in Stillwater. I just don't know. I don't know that a Friday night, it's early evening. It's not even a late game, like 6:30 p.m. People are, I don't know. I don't see that being like, Stillwater could certainly be one of those scary atmospheres. The crowd is right there on top of you. You got everybody slapping their paddles and all of that. But I don't know. Friday night games, I just feel like the atmospheres are not as crazy as this would be, even if it were a Thursday 7 p.m. game or a Saturday game at all. So I don't know. I think Kansas State is just way too good to trip up in that game and too well coached. I mean, the way they're rolling right now, I mean, obviously they've lost their game and they're not going to have a perfect season, but I think they have every opportunity to find their way to Arlington at the end of the season for the Big 12 championship. So I think they end up crushing in that game. Yeah, I guess we have to talk about Red River. It's the big game. It's the biggest game of the week. It's, these teams, not very often are they both good in the same season. So, or at least in the recent history, it doesn't happen that much. Oklahoma was dominant for a time. Last season, Oklahoma was terrible for this game. So it's going to be fun to see them in what should be a pretty even match. I think a lot of the commentary here is that Texas is just going to stomp all over Oklahoma, just like they did last year. At least that's what I'm seeing from a lot of the national people. And I don't know. I mean, I picked Oklahoma to win this game. I still believe that Dylan Gabriel is a very good quarterback and that this offense is going to be very solid against Texas and that the defense for the Sooners is much improved. Which, it can still be much improved and only give up like 35 points instead of 55 or whatever it was last year. But I hope it's a good game. I mean, I know there's been some thrillers, even when the teams were not especially nationally relevant, where, multiple overtimes and all of that. But I hope it's one of those games, and then these teams beat up each other and then have a tough time winning games the rest of the way in the Big 12 calendar.
I picked Oklahoma as well, and I think some of that talk about, was it 49-0 last year? Texas won that game. I'm trying to remember because Dylan Gabriel, of course, got injured. Yeah, because Dylan Gabriel got injured in the TCU game. He didn't play, and Davis Bevel, God bless him, was horrible in the TCU game. He was horrible. Like I'm kind of amazed that was the best Oklahoma could do at the backup quarterback spot. Like I don't mean to be that rude to the guy, but he was awful. So this is a completely different situation. This is an Oklahoma offense that looks really, really good right now. Dylan Gabriel is playing very well. They're still able to run the ball really well on top of that. So part of me thinks this could be a shootout with a lot of fireworks. Texas has tremendous talent on offense. Quinn Ewers is taking a step forward from where he was last year. And I think it's going to be a barn burner, but Oklahoma is my team to come out on top there. Any final thoughts, Anthony, on our football items this evening before we get into some of the other TCU things and transition out of here?
Oh man, I think looking a little bit at national games, um, pretty interested to see what Alabama does in College Station. I think that is, I continue kind of tied with my Oklahoma thoughts. My dark horse thoughts for this season were Dylan Gabriel wins the Heisman and Alabama wins the national championship. And maybe after this week, both of those things are completely gone. It's totally possible, but I'm still hanging on to it. So I think that's a really exciting game. The national slate is pretty light this week too. Just a lot of teams are on bye week. For some reason, everybody takes the same week off, I guess. But um, really excited, looking forward to that game as well. I think that um, Texas A&M looking to make a statement that they're not completely dead after that loss earlier this season to Miami, and Alabama looking to do the same after. And Alabama has looked pretty dominant since losing it to Texas at home earlier, and I think that Alabama comes out and takes that one, but should be a pretty exciting game on the national stage as well.
Yeah, Alabama's still trying to find its way offensively a little bit. They've been, of course, experimenting with a couple of different quarterbacks. They started the year with Jalen Milroe, and then he went to the bench, and now he's back in the starting lineup. But their defense has looked really good over these last couple of weeks, and that's really what's allowed them to stay in some of these games and win some of these uh, atypical low scoring games for Alabama. I'm used to this offense putting up so many points, but the defense is playing well, and we'll see I picked Alabama to win that game. I pick against Texas A&M every chance that I can get. It's just kind of my thing for this year. So we will see what happens in the Big 12 and on the national stage this weekend. That will wrap it up for our football discussion this evening. We do have a couple more TCU items to hit on. Anthony, I know you're watching TCU Soccer right now. They are probably just wrapping up their
Yes,
match
the
against
game is
Kansas.
over. It is final. TCU gets the 1-0 victory on the Gracie Bryan goal. She's been on a hot streak lately, and the TCU, I think that's 6 in a row, 5 or 6 in a row that TCU has won. I think it's a 6-game win streak now. So another Big 12 win. TCU continues to push itself up, now reaching back into the top 25 rankings at 23rd overall. TCU's been hanging out at second in the Big 12 standings, so we'll see what happens around the conference today and through the weekend. But TCU will continue to be in that mix for regular season champions here. And it will kind of hinge on the game Sunday in Lubbock against Texas Tech, who I haven't seen if they've played today or not, but went into today with undefeated conference records. So huge game coming up for the Horned Frogs soccer, and another big win where they pretty much controlled this game. All that I got to see of it, I started watching about midway through the first half, and they were controlling possession. I mean, Kansas had nothing. I mean, maybe a shot on goal that was, a little opportunity, but TCU controlled this game and got that one goal, and that was enough to give them the win.
Yeah, that's where this TCU soccer team is really excelling right now, is being able to possess the ball. The defense has been outstanding. These last few matches, 2-0 win, shutout over Kansas State, 1-0 shutout over Oklahoma State, and now 1-0 shutout over Kansas. Lauren Kellett's a tremendous keeper, but she's not even having to really save many shots because TCU is doing such a good job of possessing the ball, turning players away. The defense, again, has been tremendous over these last few matches. And with the win, TCU now 9-3-2 on the season and 5-0-1 in the Big 12. Again, with that one tie being on the road against a top 10 team in BYU, which at that point was number one in the country. So TCU soccer playing very well right now. Sunday game against Texas Tech. We will recap that on our next episode of Frogs Up. But With us recording Thursday evening, we had a chance to hit on that match today against Kansas. TCU volleyball will be in action tomorrow and Saturday against Cincinnati. TCU right now is 3-1 in the conference and 10-5 overall on the season. So a good start in conference play for both soccer and volleyball. Also, TCU men's tennis has been in action. The fall schedule very light, a lot of individual singles and doubles type stuff. TCU has a handful of players competing right now in the ITA All-American Championships. Most notably, Louis Maxted and Duncan Chan reached the round of 16 in the doubles competition. Jack Pennington has also looked very good in this tournament as well, along with Jake Fearnley. So TCU tennis, we talked about the Frogs in the spring, unbelievable season. And a lot of those guys are back for the 2023-24 campaign. So we will continue to follow the soccer, volleyball, non-ref programs on our website, frogsaward.com. Continue to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, as well at Frogs of War, as we continue to bring all of you the latest and greatest in TCU sports and athletics. We appreciate all of the support. Thanks so much for listening in this evening. This is our midweek episode. Again, I am Russ Hodges. That is Anthony North. We will be back in a few days to recap the Iowa State game, as well as talk about TCU soccer and TCU volleyball. Don't forget to check out Charlie Hustle online, charliehustle.com. Get your TCU swag or your Big 12 conference swag. Promo codes Frogs of War or promo code 101215. The Patreon, if you want to donate, it's greatly appreciated. Patreon.com/1012 network. Support us here on Frogs Up. Support the 1012 network. On at Athlete Trading Cards. Again, check out our socials, Facebook and Twitter, for more information about that. That will wrap it up for the evening. Again, I'm Russ Hodges. That's Anthony North, and we will sign off here with a Frogs Up.
Get your frogs up.